Well, yes, that music confirms that it is time for my Sunday sermon. And this week, I'm actually wanting to dedicate my Sunday sermon to the late Terry Knight, who passed away recently after a battle with illness. And he loved not only TalkTV, but he listened to my show and loved my Sunday sermon. So I wanted to dedicate this Sunday sermon to Terry and to his widow, Kim, who I had a really nice chat with last week. And therefore I think it's appropriate to try and focus on the positives. Because amongst all the madness, all that's going on, all the depressing news, the chaos, actually, sometimes we forget that we are a great nation. And I want you to sort of put yourselves, if you're in a small leisure craft, a small boat, and you set sail from France and you're heading towards the glorious white cliffs of Dover, you're leaving behind the frog legs of French cuisine, you're leaving behind the filterless Gauloise cigarettes, and you're coming across the channel. What is it that's great about the UK, great about Britain? I thought I'd kick off with my thoughts, but then I'm really keen to get your views, because I'm bound to have forgotten something really important. For me, the number one, of course, has to be the late Queen and the monarchy. Utterly unique around the world in terms of its standing, a huge asset to the UK. For me, number two, actually, is our armed forces, and indeed our special forces, the SAS, admired, respected, and indeed feared around the world. These are great, great things that the UK has and should treasure. And then, of course, very quickly, I move to another treasure that we have in the UK, which is the Premier League. Football fans around the world, literally all over the world, admire our Premier League, follow it, millions and millions of fans, which is why it's so successful and there's so much money involved. Other things, thinking of sport, you've got Wimbledon, tennis, you've got strawberries and cream, you've got cricket and Lords and the Oval, and that sense of fair play. Does that come from cricket, or does that just come from being British? I'm keen to know your views on that. And from sport, the delicacies. We were touching earlier on biscuits, but what about food? I mean, some British food is utterly, utterly superb. I'm thinking, for example, of that wonderful Welsh lamb, or the sizzling Aberdeen Angus steak. Forget all those Wallies in Animal Rebellion. I know I've got negative, but I think some of our food, some of our meat is the best in the world. I really, really do. From the sizzling Scottish sirloin steak, I stayed in Scotland to think of the seductive Scotch whisky. So many wonderful flavours, so much to admire. And then keeping on the S's, there is, of course, and keeping on the liquid, the sensational Spitfire. Not only the iconic aeroplanes, but it's a pretty good beer brewed in Kent. I have enjoyed it many a time over the years. And then, of course, talking of icons, we have to think of the one and only, the irrepressible, the extraordinary, shaken, not stirred, James Bond. And, of course, his Aston Martin, or Aston Martins, for as long as they last. And you go from James Bond and his cars to, what about education? Well, of course, we've got some of the finest universities in the world. People think of the great halls and colleges of Oxford and Cambridge, and indeed many others, the Durhams of this world. Some fine, fine universities, but also some of the top private schools, again, that are admired around the world. These are things that, in a sense, sometimes we're so close to the wood we can't see the trees. We forget what is great about Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And then there's the language that we're all lucky enough to speak. The English language, the most spoken language in the world, centred here in the UK. And then sometimes it works for us and sometimes it works against us, but actually, admired around the world is indeed our legal system and our lawyers. Yes, sometimes they drive us mad, sometimes they cost us too much, but actually they are viewed as some of the most honest and well-respected lawyers in the world. And I'm going back to sport. I nearly forgot the great racing endeavours. If you know, anybody could think about the Grand National, for example. Have you lost money? Have you won money on the Grand National? That is for sure. The great Rupert Bell is probably one of the world's worst tipsters, but there we are. He loves his racing. Another great race, the Derby. And now we're reminded of music, because even though we didn't win it, we've got Eurovision back. Is that exciting you? About being great, about Great Britain? But the music, again, it's global. The Beatles, Robbie Williams, Coldplay, Adele. Give us a call what you think is other great music that inspires and motivates people all over the world. These are things to be proud of and to treasure. And then I'm thinking of business and the world of industry and some other great brand names that we should be proud of. The incredible Diggers of JCB, made in the Midlands. Or that other incredible devices. Many of us have them. The victorious vacuum of Dyson. An incredible product. Such an entrepreneur. So many great things. Many other great entrepreneurs and products here in the UK. And from the cities of London, Manchester, Liverpool, to our incredible countryside. Again, hugely admired around the world, treasured, looked after. And that is something to be really proud of. Many of you might think about the next thing that I was thinking of. Our ability to shop, and sometimes to queue. I was certainly in a long queue recently. But we are great shoppers. These are amazing things that we can be very proud of. And there's a trend about all of them that I'll come back to in a minute. But how often do we hear people from elsewhere in the world saying, you've got the greatest, most admired, most copied healthcare system in the world? Do we ever hear that? I'm not so sure we do we? Do we hear now that we've got some of the safest streets, the safest, most efficient law and order system, our police force the most respected? Do we hear that? Do our criminals fear the consequences? I'm not sure we do. Do we ever hear that our state schooling system is the best in the world? I'm not sure we do. I can think of others. I can think of Sweden, for example, people talk very warmly about. Do we ever hear that our Foreign Office is the most admired diplomatic force in the world? Or that our Border Force is the most efficient at dealing with people coming illegally into the country, quickly, promptly, efficiently? I'm not sure we do. And then another massive bugbear for so many of us, trains. If you're trying to catch a train yesterday, good luck for that. So many train strikes at the moment. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a reputation that you could set your watch by the trains, the arrival and departure times of our trains? Because literally, that's what happens in Switzerland. We've heard about the admiration for Swiss watches, but actually the Swiss railway system, you can set your watch by it. I think we need a bit of that, don't you? So here's the question for you. All of the great things that I described, almost without exception, they're thanks to creativity, ingenuity, flair, entrepreneurship of individuals, of small businesses, of the private sector. What troubles me is that of all the things that aren't respected around the world, but could be, they're the ones that actually are managed not by the private sector, by entrepreneurs, by small businesses. No, they're the ones that are actually run by the state. So you see, we've got a sort of crisis of crises, but most of them seem to be in areas that are run by civil servants or politicians. But you might have a different view on that. I might have forgotten things that are being well run by our civil servants. I might have forgotten things that are going very badly in the private sector. But it did just strike me as you think about what's going well, how can we be positive and enthusiastic, it really did strike me that there's a real trend there. For example, the vaccines, the acquisition of vaccines in the early part of the COVID crisis. You know, we were the first nation to be putting vaccines in people's arms and have a broad range of vaccines. Who organised that? Who was involved in the vaccine task force that was, you know, considered widely a great success? It was a lady from the private sector, Kate Bingham. She's got a serialisation out later this month of her book. Fascinating that will be. I'll be talking about that later and in coming weeks. So I think it's just really important to reflect on that, because surely, as we want to get better and better, there is so much more we can do to bring in that private sector excellence, that military discipline into the way that we run parts of the state, that we want to do be so much better. We want to do well. We want to be proud of. But at the moment, they're a bit of a mess. And we can surely improve on that. So for me, I really do feel we're a great nation that's being badly managed. And we can do so much better. And with that, here endeth my Sunday sermon.